Hi Vermont history students! Hi, and this is the video for Unit 5, which is the first unit of Part 3 of our course, Week 3. And I am making this video on Friday because on Wednesday, 2 days ago, I made the video for Unit 4 and it was really stressful trying to get it online, so I'm going to get it done quick. Which means that I've already checked this morning and seen that a bunch of people have written in for the Unit 4 discussion question, and I can only anticipate, hopefully, that it's going to be a wonderful town meeting, and those responses are due by next Monday, and so hopefully we're sort of rolling along. I expect assessment papers to start rolling in soon. I just want to emphasize, make it really easy on me. Be really clear. The first sentence of your paper should be something like, between this year and this year, between this decade and this decade, between 1800 and 1850, Vermont grew more X. Vermont grew more united, more divided. Vermont started out united, became divided in the 1820s and 30s, and then became more united again, or the opposite of that. Whatever you want to argue, whatever the evidence tells you, is fine with me. But really the first assessment papers should start rolling in really soon. The deadline theoretically is a week from next Monday. Like by the end of the third week, you want to have your first assessment paper into me. Okay? Write me letters. Read the assignment. Obviously the assignment is posted there online. And if you have any questions, obviously write me. I'd be happy to answer them. So this is the video for the first class that is on the Gilded Age. And the Gilded Age is the topic of this week, and it runs from the end of the Civil War until about 1890. And that's on a national scale. It's considered the Gilded Age. In our course in particular, it really makes sense as a coherent era because it culminates in the 1890s with the rise of summer tourism. And summer tourism is the big turning point in Vermont's history. It's kind of like you get the uphill-downhill thing. Yeah, they still kind of exist now, although they've evolved. But I get the uphill-downhill thing before the Civil War. But it's when summer tourism kicks in that it's like Vermont's like looking at Vermont through like a out-of-focus lens. And then when summer tourism comes in, then it sort of comes into focus. Because before summer tourism becomes a really huge industry in Vermont, and it became huge, the second largest industry in the state by the 1890s, downhillers know what they want, which is development, development. If there's a tree, cut it down. If there's copper in the ground, dig it out. And then summer tourism makes it so downhillers then appreciate gradually a principle of diminishing returns, that you can't destroy the very thing that you're selling. And so therefore preservation and regulations and caps on development and things like this start to make their way into downhill life. But in the Gilded Age, that's not yet what is the reality for downhillers. In the Gilded Age, Vermont runs around this polarity, which was Vermont in decline or was it stable? And that's how people argued about it at the time. Downhillers, generally speaking, thought of Vermont as being in terrible decline. It was known as the winter period for Vermont. It was dark, everyone was old, the young people were leaving, and small towns were getting smaller and big towns were getting bigger, and the state population staying about the same. And there was this great gnawing fear among a lot of people in the state in the 1870s and 1880s that there was something seriously wrong with Vermont and that it was in terrible decline. On the other hand, it could be looked at, and people back then did look at Vermont at the time, as being perfectly stable. There was nothing wrong with it. The people leaving were the ones who were superfluous to the local economy, who weren't necessary. Life was wonderful. I mean, obviously you have your everyday problems, but generally speaking, small town life was glorious. It was homogeneous, it was consensus-driven. People had relatives and neighbors who they'd known their whole lives. In fact, it is the small town life that downhillers called decline in the 1870s is very much going to be the thing that they'll be selling after to summer tourists. Small town, cooperative, interdependent life. So decline versus stable, that's the polarity, that's the big dialectic around which Vermont runs in the Gilded Age. Now, this is the first unit on the Gilded Age, and it goes up to the late 1870s or so, and it's comprised of 3 sections. First, as you'll see on the outline, I want to just get you started on my book project. I'm working on a book that is about the consequences and aftermath of, in 1890, Vermont had this ridiculous program to replace departed Yankee farmers by recruiting Swedes. And they brought 54 Swedes over and in 1890, and everyone agreed it was a stupid idea. Some of the Swedes settled in a small town in Vermont called Landgrove, and I'm writing a book about both Landgrove and the descendants of those Swedes. And I'm going to try to incorporate that into the summer course, and hopefully it's going to work out for you, because I kind of, if I can't write the book because I'm busy, at least I can like keep it warm. So hopefully you'll indulge me. So there's stuff about Alonzo Valentine and the Tift family down in Bennington County, and trust me, I know where I'm going with that, okay? So the first section of the outline is about decline and stability, and I have some statistics there and some quotes and things. It really revolves around two very different lives. One of them is the life of a guy named G.G. Benedict, George Grenville Benedict, who grew up in Burlington. His dad was a professor at UVM. Then his dad made a fortune running telegraph lines and bought George, when he graduated from college, the Burlington Free Press. So he was the owner and publisher of the Burlington Free Press. Won the Congressional Medal of Honor at Gettysburg, came back to Vermont, lived in Burlington, and was a member of every imaginable club. He was a member of the Board of Trustees of UVM and the Board of Railroad Companies and National Life, and he was in the State Senate, and he was in the Algonquin Club, and he was in the history clubs, and I mean just everything, right? And he occupied this one world, the educated world of downhill Burlington. And I contrast that with the world of a guy whose name was Gramps Abbott. And Gramps Abbott lived in Chelsea and was a typical hill farmer. And you'll see on the outline that what in 1870 a typical year for Gramps Abbott was. And he did all these things that G.G. Benedict couldn't do. You'll see, but he like sheared wool and made baskets and built stone walls and all these other things. Now there was this organization called the Vermont Dairymen's Association, and the Dairymen's Association was downhillers who wanted to tell uphillers how to farm. And Benedict was a member of the Dairymen's Association, but he didn't know how to milk a cow. And so, you know, what you have, when the railroads come through particularly, downhillers to a great extent leave uphill towns and congregate in the biggest places, and uphill and downhill go their separate directions in the Gilded Age, and that's what Benedict and Abbott are trying to represent, is these two different worlds. Hi, kitty. We'll see if the kitty comes up here. All right, so anyway, the second section of the course is about the great controversy at the time over over the University of Vermont taking in the State Agricultural College. A Vermont senator named Justin Morrill, right after the Civil War, during the Civil War, passed something called the Morrill Land Grant Colleges Act, and it established agricultural colleges in every state. But in other states, they established new colleges, and they would put them in rural places. Massachusetts, they put it in Amherst. In Maine, they put it in Orono. But in Vermont, because of the small size of the state, they attached it to the University of Vermont and made it UVM and State Agricultural College. And the uphill class hated that. And there was a guy whose name was Zuar Jameson, who was a farmer who was from Irisburg, who was a member of the Board of Agriculture. And the Board of Agriculture was a state agency, unlike the Dairymen's Association, which was a private agency. The Board of Agriculture was a state agency that wanted to help tell farmers how to farm better. And generally speaking, farmers ignored the Board of Agriculture and didn't go to its meetings because it was downhillers telling them what to do. And Jameson, who had grown up uphill and was really kind of progressive and into the Grange, an interesting guy, wanted to make the Board of Agriculture much more responsive to hill farmers. So he asked them in meetings what were they concerned about, and they said it's that damn agricultural college in Burlington, and which doesn't really exist even because UVM was taking the agricultural college fund and just spending it on other things, new buildings and stuff like that. And so here you go, come here. Hi! And so Jameson, as the head of the Board of Agriculture came out with a report that said that UVM should not have the agricultural college. It should be separated, and it should be sent down and put in Randolph or something like that. And as a result, he got fired from the board. So he got himself elected to the state legislature, where he became the head of the House Agricultural Committee, and he fought and fought in order to get the agricultural college separated from UVM, and it was a huge fight between uphillers and downhillers. And so it gives you an illustration of the sort of social and political conflict that took place between uphill and downhill in the Gilded Age, when the question was, is Vermont in decline or is it stable? So there's a third section of the course that is meant to sort of help you understand the context and the meaning of the sort of the division that is illustrated by the UVM story. There was this guy named Highland Hall, and Highland Hall was from Bennington, born in the 1790s. So he grew up around Green Mountain Boys, and he was so impressed by the Bunker Hill Monument in Boston that he wanted to have a battle monument built for Bennington's battle. And so he had this, he fought for it, he raised money, he founded the Bennington Battle Monument Association. He wanted to have it put up in 1877, the 100th anniversary of the battle, but they couldn't pull it together, and other people on the Battle Monument Association said, we should have a centennial celebration instead and get people to come to Bennington. So they had that instead, even though Hall didn't want that, and it was a disaster. It poured rain and no one could figure out where they were supposed to be. But Hall kept pressing and pressing. Hall wanted a Bennington Battle Monument. And the reason he wanted it, so he wanted it in order to sort of unite Vermonters and tell them that their past is important. And when it finally came time to design the monument, Hall insisted it had to be left blank. He didn't want any words on it. He didn't want a historian writing the story of the Battle of Bennington on it. He wanted it left blank. My guess, the reason why he wanted it left blank is because he wanted it to be for everyone. He wanted anyone who looks at it to be able to tell a story about it that's about them, rather than having someone tell the story of Vermont or the Bennington Battle to them. But is it a sign of the weakness of the imagined community in that era that they had to leave the monument blank rather than have it tell a story? People did say to him, no one will know what it's for. He said, people will know what it's for. It's for to unite the imagined community of Vermonters. But is it a sign of the weakness of the imagined community of Vermont that you had to leave the monument blank? Or is it a sign of the strength of the community is no matter how much differences there are, they all had that past, that collective past in common. And that's the discussion question for you, which you don't need to answer until next Wednesday, but it's a good one, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. And so anyway, write me, and hopefully everything's going well. And my little boy Sonny